Supergirl episode 5, How Does She Do It? Now, this episode was initially meant to be the episode that we actually got last week, so this is the one they actually just switched them, and they did decide to give us the episode that they skipped over, which was fairly obvious. Just like it was obvious we skipped over something big in the last one, it was obvious that they went backwards because it's like, okay, this is, how Jimmy decided whether or not he was going to be with Lucy. And, this is some of the other stuff. There were certain other lines like, before Kat left, she asked about Kara's mother, and that was something that they talked about in the live wire thing, where it's like, oh, I never knew that, and I was just kind of asking you random questions about your parents and stuff. So it was actually cool that they went back. I was glad to see that happen. They kind of, I guess, they had really no choice. I'm looking forward to the episode that comes on tonight because I'm assuming that it's going to be taking place after, kind of the mix-up episodes. So we might actually get into this real big mystery around Hank. And honestly, if I remember that I even saw this episode, because I didn't get to watch it on Monday, and I didn't get the chance to see it until, like, I don't think I watched it until yesterday, or maybe it was I think I watched it on Saturday or something, and I still didn't get the chance to review it, and I forgot yesterday that I'd even seen it, so that's why this is officially a full week late, and even more than that, because the episode is already aired by the time I'm doing this, because it's like almost 9 o'clock right now. Or it is 9 o'clock, it's like 9:19. But it was still a good episode. I actually really enjoyed this one. I was glad to see that this episode, by the end at least, I think this episode kind of held up to the same as the other one. Because, like, the thing with Hank, of course, that's going to be a much bigger deal, because it's just like, what the heck is happening? And this episode actually kind of helped, because seeing that it was a reveal as far as, okay, your father actually used to work for the EOD and stuff, but we knew the weird stuff was happening with Hank already, and this episode actually did a little bit more to show what he could do, because we got to see him with that bomb, and it seemed, I would assume, he basically absorbed, like, the explosive force. Like, he took something out of it and it just didn't blow up. So I don't know exactly how it could have worked. I guess you could say it was based on what the bombs were specifically, but he basically, like, took the power out of the bombs, and that was it. Like, they just couldn't go off anymore. So I enjoyed that, and we got Maxwell Lord again in his, like, super fancy train, which was actually pretty cool. But it kind of introduced Maxwell Lord as a villain for this up by the end of this episode, and I was like, that's really cool. I actually enjoyed that more than the whole reveal about their father and how he used to work for Hank and everything like that. So I was like, okay, that's really sweet, because clearly this guy's really smart. He's a genius. And then we find out that he basically forced this guy to do all this crazy stuff so that he, could actually, he would pay for everything for his daughter. So I was like, it just made him pretty cool as a villain. It was like, all right, that adds an element to what he's going to be doing the next time he shows up, because now that they've had the little conversation, and he kind of goes through, it's like, okay, well, this would have tested your agility, and this would have tested your strength if, with the building collapsing. And then the train thing really was to test who she was, and it's like, you came to this train with a couple hundred people on it compared to an airport with a couple thousand people, and that says a lot as to, what you did. So it made a lot of sense. Like, that was pretty cool of him. It was very evil, and very evil genius, which I liked. It was a very cunning way for that to work out. And just the fact that he ended up being the villain at the end, because it was like, oh, it was this guy. And then it got really weird, and it was like, oh, it actually just turned out to be him the whole episode. He did it to himself. And we also got a little backstory on him about his parents and how they used to work for the government, and that's why he hates the government and things like that. So I personally think it was a pretty fun episode. I don't know if it... I wouldn't say it was really hurt or anything by them having to switch it or anything like that. I think, considering how... Like, the only thing that actually carried over was the Jimmy stuff. That was the only thing that really carried over from this episode to the next episode, or what was supposed to be the next episode. And, like, the one little question that Kat had for Kara, where it was like, oh, what about your mother and stuff like that, those are the only two moments, and that was just a quick sentence. But really, it was the Jimmy stuff that carried over. Everything else was just, like, very concise. It could have been... it could have easily been the same thing. Like, there's one other scene, like, in the beginning after Kara takes down like the super quick drone. When they go to Hank and he's like, I'll investigate this, and her sister's like, you can trust him. That's probably the only other thing that changed, and it was just like really two little sentences, and then the Jimmy stuff really changed, and that was it. And so it was like this episode still really stood out on its own, and it was definitely a fun episode. I was surprised to find out that Kat was even a mother. That really surprised me. So that was, an interesting bit of insight, which once again didn't really translate over. And I guess that kind of explains some of the dialogue from the Livewire episode where they talk about like, oh, you know this much about me, and that includes her son and stuff. And that's kind of how they get into the whole conversation about parents and things like that. So very minor stuff, but overall, I don't think anything was hurt by them having to switch the episode. I just totally understand why they had to switch it, obviously. But it was definitely a fun episode. I am looking forward to this next one. I don't know if it's really going to pick up, because that's just TV shows in general. Even with them going in the normal order now, you never really know how much they're going to dive into the Hank stuff. And, like, they're going to be doing their little investigation. But obviously there's going to be, like, the villain. There's going to be, like, the main component as to, what's going to be taking place. And I don't know what it's going to be because I haven't looked up any promos. I'm assuming that they've put them up online because, of course, they didn't have them last week because of, or I guess technically the week before last, because they flipped the episode, so they didn't do a promo for the one we got tonight. So I don't really know what to expect from it whatsoever, but there's going to be a main villain. And if it is Hank, or, the main focus actually is on Hank, that would be great, because we're in the first season, so it would be great to just have a really cool focus. And at this point, like, even with these last two episodes, it was switched or not, it had nothing to do with the Phantom Zone. It was just like, her aunt is out there, they have the Kryptonite Blade, we haven't seen a single thing with that in 2 whole episodes. So I'm hoping that comes into play. I hope that's the side story, or even the main story, and then the other story is the Hank stuff. So I hope that's what we get tonight, because I feel like that's kind of what we need, because we've done they did a recurring character because it was Maxwell, and he's now kind of, going down the route of being a villain, or at least an antagonist. And then the other one was just like, meh, it was just a random enemy. That was pretty much all there was to it. So hopefully it gets back into the Astra stuff and her attacking Kara and things like that. And then the side story is them investigating Hank and trying to figure out what happened to their father, because that would make for a pretty fun episode if both of them were really big deals for the story instead of just another villain of the week, and then the side story was important, because nothing has really been that important, side story or otherwise, in these last 2 episodes. Like, the Jimmy stuff was just like, meh. Probably the biggest thing is the fact that in the episode that was supposed to air last week, when they got switched, the Livewire one, Wynn does kiss Kara on the cheek in that episode. So that's pretty much like the biggest thing that happened in that. Otherwise, it was like, alright, there was a super villain, which was cool. Definitely a fun action scene, and they do get, like, a new, super villain. But ultimately, it's like, when she beat her, she'll probably escape and show up in, like, season 2 or 3 or something, way down the line. But at this point, it was just like, oh, here's the villain of the week. Really cool, but she beat her, and that's it. And then the same thing this episode, we find out who the real villain is with a nice little twist. And he'll come back again, I'm sure, same thing. He might come back sooner because of the fact that he's not known as a villain, but ultimately it's kind of the same thing. It was just like, alright, villain of the week, little stuff happening here, relationship stuff in both episodes. And then Thanksgiving, the overarching story of them, finding out about their dad, was like the biggest thing in both these episodes. And they might not even bother talking about it. They might mention it in this episode that's coming up. Hopefully it's the main focus, though. But I certainly enjoyed this one. I was really glad that they didn't skip over, and it was just like, well, we had to switch them, so they just put them, out of order. That's just how it was. Certainly glad to see that they, now we officially have the episodes. We have all the story elements now, even if it was backwards. We got them. Definitely a fun episode. Visuals were really cool in this episode. It's something I really enjoyed about the show. The visuals from episode 1, I think, I really liked them. And this had a couple of really cool moments. I think my favorite one was definitely at the end when she was stopping the train, just the way it looked. And this train was going, I believe it was like 500 kilometers an hour or something like that. So this train is just shooting through the city like nothing, and she has to stop this thing, and they have her on like basically just a metal path, and she's just flying through the city. There are buildings just flying past her, and visually, I was like, that actually looks really really cool. So I like that scene. And the part where she saved the building, I thought was pretty cool. And she does it was like a little spin that she did, which is totally unnecessary, but it looked cool. And then her, using her laser vision again, definitely pretty cool. Tons of X-ray stuff in this episode, like X-ray mixed with like her telescopic vision. That was pretty cool because she's looking through. Like in the first time she did it, she was looking like that. That had to have been like a couple, like maybe 5 to 8 blocks or something crazy. Because eventually it was just so fast. I was like, I'm not sure how far this is going. Plus, it seemed diagonal, so that technically carries it further. But it was really cool. And then when she was on the train, she's just shooting through everything. And I was like, that's pretty cool. I found it kind of funny, like, out of all those buildings she went through, it was like, there's not a single piece of lead that just happened to block something. I thought that was kind of funny. It was like, the first thing I thought, I was like, just no lead used in construction whatsoever, even remotely slight little things made out of lead, just nothing. But I thought that was actually kind of funny. But I certainly enjoyed the visuals of this episode, and I think it was a really good one overall. But, of course, I want to know what you guys thought about it, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, least favorite parts. And I want to know what you guys think about them kind of putting Maxwell Lord in this antagonistic role by the end of the episode. Because now that, he was already established as, like, the super genius and everything from the first episode, now he's kind of, showing himself to be a villain. And that's always dangerous. He of course, him being like this super genius who doesn't like Supergirl, it does kind of put him in kind of the Lex Luthor camp. But that's never really bad, because Lex Luthor is always causing issues for Superman. And a lot of times it can be really boring, because sometimes it just depends on the writers. But other ways it can be very exciting. I don't think Maxwell Lord is going to come out in like a crazy, freaking suit or anything to fight Supergirl. But it's cool to have this smart villain kind of in the background waiting for his moment. And who knows how that'll play out. I doubt he'll end up teaming up with Astra, because I just don't see that happening, because she kind of wants to take over, Earth. But it's a menacing villain, and a menacing smart villain is always fun to me. But like I said, I want to know what you guys think, so please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.